Welcome back to another episode of Practice Underwater. This was the third and final straw for me in not vetting my guests before the episode. This is 3 for 3 on not, or this is, I've always done it. This has always been my style, Matt. You know, I just get a guest on air, and while we're on air, I'm figuring out their practice, and I will then figure it out as I go. That's always been my style. And this time it totally bit me in the A big time. So does it count as not cussing if I just don't say the bad word? I think it does.
I think, but everyone's thinking the word, so you basically like you said it.
Yeah, I could say like bite me in the rear, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But so anyway, this one I definitely caught myself in an interview I did not belong in.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. You didn't enjoy it, and I could feel it. It's actually one of my favorite to listen to. But George, I did want to address something. You've been getting a lot of feedback with your other show, Dental Friends with Benefits, that everyone should listen to. That you come off in Practice Underwater and share practice as this rigid, analytical, stiff, you're kind of robotic. And I'm sitting here really encouraging you from the bottom of my heart. Open up a little on this show, show your personality. You're a very fun guy. You're one of my good friends. Like, we laugh. So I really want you to bring that to these interviews, because you've clearly gotten a lot of feedback that you're becoming off too robotic on these. That's all I'll say.
Is that the roast that I've been waiting for?
Yeah, that's the roast.
Okay. So does this have anything to do with me calling you a stiff on Dental Friends with Benefits?
Yeah, it has a lot to do with it. I wouldn't have roasted you if you couldn't call me a stiff, which is just patently untrue, first of all. Second of all the feedback you're getting on your reviews say you come off as a stiff in these interviews. So who's right here?
For my defense here, we all internally huddled at chair practices, and most of us felt that, for sure, I will own up to the stiff, robotic. I think what the Zuckerberg of dentistry was the comment. I will totally own that. Seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, totally. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's how I've been on Practice Underwater. I think Practice Underwater is the first time I got vulnerable on air.
Yeah, I'm just joking for the reference. You haven't been that way at all. You were that way.
For sure. Season 1, 2, 3, 4. I could see why you think I totally emotionless robot. Why is that relevant on this interview? I'm curious.
Well, I needed to say it. It's some interview. I mean, it's not relevant in this one at all. But
so you picked the intro. We have very little to talk about.
Right. Got to fill the airways with something.
Okay, so this was dangerously close to being the very first ever one-parter for Practice Underwater. At the end, I found something to make part 2, but I think part 2 good. Part 2 good.
A little.
Part 1 is tough. Yeah, it was me figuring out what's going on with this practice and me realizing that there's very little to talk about. So enjoy.
Welcome back to Practice Underwater. This is George, and I'm here with our fake doc today. She said her name is Laura, and she said her name and location are off the table, and that's always been the case. So, of course, we're going to do it that way. But I wanted to know, how long have you been thinking about that fake name, Laura?
Oh, it's been a good couple days.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Interview's been scheduled, and were you thinking between multiple names, or how did that really? What were the other ones?
Well, Ashley, but then you have your podcast with Ashley, so I was like, can't do that one. So by the way, I'm a 4th listener to that podcast.
You're the 4th listener. Okay. Nice. All right, so there are actually people listening to that. I'll try to forget about that when I record. So Laura, then. Okay, well, it's a good thing I don't know you too well. Hopefully the real name doesn't slip. So right. Tell us a little bit about sort of just yourself, I guess. Yeah. Obviously, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah. So I graduated in 2018, and I worked in the corporate world for a little while, and then I decided to go to the private practice, and then the pandemic hit. And a week before we shut down as a state, I got an email stating, hey, there's a practice for sale. And it is literally right around the corner of where I just moved. So I was like, I knew this is an older doctor, so I knew he would not accept emails. So I called him up, and the assistant is totally screening his calls. I was like, hi, I was wondering if I could talk to the doctor. And I didn't want to explain too much, because I didn't know if he told them that he was selling the practice. So she gets back on the phone. She goes, he doesn't know who you are. So I was like, okay, yeah. She goes, oh, are you looking to buy a practice? I was like, yes. she goes, oh, let me forward you to him. So
That's unusual.
I know. I tried to give like the names of the people who gave me the name of the practice with a phone number, and he didn't know. So I finally talked to him, and I was leaving for a dental conference and that weekend, and he goes, hey, so can you come like tomorrow? I was like, yeah, I'll push back going to this dental conference just to see this practice. Sure enough, saw the practice, went to the dental conference, and then our state shut down. So
Wow.
yeah. And
Is that like March 17th?
yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember that weekend. Jeez.
I know.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And I was staying with some of my dental friends at this conference, and one of their husbands is a resident in the hospital, and he goes, you should probably go home tonight. Our state is closing. So I ended up only being there for 12 hours. So I came right back. And then everything was via Zoom for 4 months, basically.
Oh
I
my
bought all
gosh.
of my equipment via Zoom. So that was great. But it was interesting because, he's older. He was dipping x-rays. Yep. And he just converted to open dental. So yeah.
Wow.
So here we are. I'm
Yeah.
a
What
month in.
I got questions. I got all
Yes.
kinds of questions.
Yep.
So you can't just tell me that story without some follow-up. So
Yeah.
first thing is, what is this email you got? Like, I've never heard of anybody selling a practice that way.
Yeah. So I became pretty good friends with I don't know if I'm even allowed to state like a dental supplier name, but I
Yeah,
became,
don't say supplier's name, but a
yeah,
supplier rep.
yes, it's a supplier rep.
Okay, so
I
rep.
became pretty close with them in dental school, and he had like a list of names of people who might be looking to buy or looking to sell, and he kind of connects you.
Mhm.
And it just so happened to be, I mean, the area that I bought in is like the Scottsdale of Arizona. It's kind of the basically the area that everyone wants to live in my state. So
Sure.
I knew
So
it would
you
go
had
off
just
the
moved
market.
there?
Yes, I just moved there for the private practice job to commute. And it ended up working out, so perfect. So I got really lucky.
So this practice that you bought, tell us a little bit about the number of operatories, revenue, employees, patient base. Kind of give us the rundown.
Yeah, so it is a 3-op practice. It has a 4th room for it's plumbed but not equipped. And currently there is one employee. He kind of fired someone during the pandemic. So and there's about 600 active patients right now. Might be a little bit more because I just brought in some new patients this month. But that was kind of like right before I started. And it is a practice that kind of he just he was in the retirement mode and was working 3 days a week. So I'm trying to grow it to more than just 3.
Okay. And when they say plumbed fourth, like I feel like I've heard that so many times. What does that mean? Like, is it an empty room with like
Yeah.
cabinets, or is it just like a totally empty room? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, so it is there are cabinets, and there's literally piping on the floor.
Okay,
And then all of my dental like school supplies are currently housed in that room.
got it.
I'm still unpacking.
Yeah, and the fourth, the not plumbed room is, or the plumbed but not equipped room is so convenient.
Yes.
So, tell me a little bit about your why this practice? What was it about it? Was it just the location?
Yeah, it was basically the location and the price for the practice. It was it was priced very well, especially for that area. So I'd be more than happy to disclose how much it was.
Well, yeah, I figured since we're not using your name or
Yes.
nobody knows where you're at, I feel like
Yeah,
numbers would be
so
nice.
it was 150,000,
Oh, cool.
and it was producing roughly like 230,000.
Okay.
Yep.
That's solid.
Yeah.
And so he did his own hygiene.
So he had a hygienist, but he fired her.
Have you contacted her?
Yeah, she's coming back on Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah, thank goodness. I cannot wait to not take x-rays ever again.
There you go.
Yeah.
So there's a front office and a hygienist.
Yes. And the front office is cross-trained to be an assistant, and I have strong feelings about the cross-training. I have seen it firsthand now, and it is something that her and I have talked about multiple times, that she's going to have to choose. And I kind of had already, I kind of saw how she was as an assistant and how she was as a front desk, and she's not EFTA, which is expanded functions. So she told me right before this weekend, she was like, so I think I decided I want to be front desk. I was like, yes.
Yeah, that's good on all levels.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'd like to have an EFTA in there. So.
Okay. So then your plans long term?
Yeah. So the goal is to get a lot more new patients, especially I would like a children age. The demographics aren't really children. I really like kids. They're a lot of fun. They say the darndest things and they tell you exactly what's on their mind. So I think they're pretty easy to work with. So I wouldn't mind growing the practice in that area, and bringing on an EFTA so that I can just drill and leave.
Sure. And, I'm more asking in terms of 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what does your career look like? What does your practice look like? Kind of anything you want. How does it look?
Yeah. So the goal is to get, obviously, the active patient base up. I would love to have $1 million practice. I mean, I feel like that's everyone's goal, right? I'm trying not to be too basic here, but, definitely have a good 4 or 5 day a week, maybe more 4 than anything, but that's kind of where I'd like to see myself. I've actually started reading all these books you guys have recommended, and now I'm kind of even thinking about doing owning multi offices.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What about the multiple practices interests you?
So I like the administrative role a lot. I obviously was never an owner until a month ago. So I really like the everyday hiccups that I could just quickly fix them and move on. And I really like that. I like being a business owner. So, and I like dentistry too, but doing my own hygiene for the last month, I've realized how much I like to be more of an administrative role.
Yeah. Doing your own hygiene sounds. Yeah,
it's awesome.
It's funny because you bought this practice that is so startup like.
It is.
I mean, realistically, is it a nice office? Like, does it look nice on the inside or?
Yes, it does. And that's why I was having a tough time with the banks with the pandemic, because it is more of a jump startup.
Yes.
So they didn't, luckily I listened to the podcast over a year ago, and I kind of got my finances in order to buy practice, or I probably would not have been in the situation.
So you're saying that you had to put, was it money down, or was it just financial liquidity where they felt comfortable that you could pay payments if there was no cash flow?
Yeah, financial liquidity. It got to the point where there were so many banks that would not loan, because they just decided not to loan money right now. And it got to the point where I actually had to ask the owner if I could do a seller's note. And he said, yeah. And I said, I'll give you some money down. And he said, no, he wanted to have his money and go.
Really?
Yeah, I know. I was shocked too. I just told him, I was like, yeah, the banks aren't really lending you. And I mean, the minute the pandemic happened, he was checked out. I mean, to even get him to go back into the practice for about a month it was very difficult. So
he went in there for a month?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the banks made him, well, they didn't make him, but they suggested that he goes back in so that they could see his production is similar to pre-COVID. So
He's got to
Yeah.
see that $19,000 a month of production back on the books.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
he did it. He did it. I was impressed. I mean, I would get texts every night saying, "This is awful. Please let me out." Like, I was like, "You're not in jail." Like,
All he had to do was seller carry, and then he doesn't deal with that.
I know. Yeah.
I find it so odd that he wouldn't do that deal.
Yeah. And I asked him, I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "I want to buy a house." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Yep, all right."
What
So
an oddball.
he is and I call him the wild card. The things that he says still till this day is wild. And they call him the tornado. He's still seeing patients. He wasn't supposed to, but some of his cases kind of have, they're still happening. And I told him he needs to be out by the first, or I'm going to start charging him rent. And he's not making the deadline. So I think I'm going to start charging him rent.
And who owns the real estate here?
A surgeon does.
What's your rent like?
$2,700 a month, 2 months deferred.
If he's paying $2,700 a month in rent and he's doing $230 a year, his facility cost must have been like 12% or something like that, 12, 13%.
Yeah, it was wild. I looked at his expenses and I was like, this, I mean, he told me, he goes, "I collect a social security check, so I don't really care."
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no way this guy's making much money off this practice right now.
No, not at all. I think he was taking home like 60 grand.
Okay, yeah. And in terms of location visibility, how is that?
Yeah, so it is on the busiest street in the area. And the office, the windows are actually facing the street. And then it is right next to a highway. It's not very far off of the highway. And then, but the problem is that it's in a, medical complex. So there's really no, sign. So I'm trying to be creative here. I'd love your ideas on
Cool.
how to advertise. I did do the Every Door Direct. It came out Friday.
Okay.
So I will let you know how that goes.
So you spent money on direct mail?
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of had a angel investor. So
What does that mean?
a family member, my parents helped me out.
Nice.
That sounds so horrible. I hate to say
Why?
that. Well, just I'm trying to get off of the parents, bill here. Been off of it for a couple years, and now I feel like I'm back on it. So, but yeah, they kind of funded that, and some obviously new equipment since he was dipping X-rays.
Yeah, I think that's neither here nor there, really. I think the thing that interested me the most was the multi-practice thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd like to kind of, so you like the administrative side.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have is it like something of one day in the future you might do this, or is it like I want to own a second practice next year type thing?
Yeah, probably one day in the future. I need to get this practice like up and going, and I need to get it to where I want it to be before I kind of start thinking about, I need to fund my bank account more to buy another practice. So
yeah, and I think it's it's funny because I would almost in your mind put a pivot point, at this day when my practice is doing X and I'm working X and this is making X. At that time, I'll decide whether or not I want multi-practice. Yeah. I think instead of making it a declaration,
right?
That because I think at this time, to date, you still have so much to do in your first practice. Mm. I think the thing that strikes me from looking at this is, wow, it's a project.
Yes.
That's a project that you have, and yes. So I definitely would be focused on that. I think it's yeah, it's funny. I mean, if you've probably been listening to the show for a long time. So you probably see my biases and how I would look at this practice on the surface.
Oh yeah. You would have told me before I even bought this practice, you've been like, nope, don't buy it. No cash flow. I wouldn't do this.
Yeah. And it's not even the cash flow that I don't mind as much. I think it's the lack of space to grow. Mm-hmm. 4 ops, and I mean, it's okay if you want to stay solo. That's fine. The lack of visibility I don't love either, but I like the price. I think I've always said privately, I don't think I've ever said this on air, but 150K for me is the number that anything less than that is worth doing what you're doing. Anything more than that, like you'll see practices listed for 400K that just totally suck. I feel like if you're going to buy a solo office, you either pay 150 or less for something like this, or you pay like 600K or more for something decent.
Right.
I think there's like the no man's land. So you kind of ended up on the bottom side of it, which I'm okay with. But I sort of want to hear your ideas on, I guess, what you think you'd like from me and how you could really use our time effectively.
Before we get back to the episode, I wanted to take a minute and thank Practice by Numbers. Without their help and allowing us to set up the shared practices dashboard, a lot of what we do on Practice Underwater wouldn't be possible. I want to take a minute and highlight a clip from the episode that we did with Rohit, where we highlighted some of the metrics that really matter most. I personally really like the dollars scheduled metric, because I always like to see, am I growing? Am I kind of, in which direction are we going? We should be at least scheduling more than we're producing, because usually some patients drop off. So I think that's kind of a good place to be. And so when I have a client and they just had a bad month and they're feeling down on themselves, I can always look at their dollar schedule to see which way are they trending. Are they going to have a big month next month? Like, can they cheer themselves up knowing that they're scheduled in a growth trajectory? Or are they ultimately, I need to say, hey man, you got an issue. I know you just had a good month, but you're setting up yourselves up for a couple bad months. And, then they can turn it around. But I think having that heads up holds you accountable as a business owner, where you're not relying on how much money did I make this month. And that's how I know, how things are going. I think you have the heads up one way or the other. I hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you guys are interested in trying out Practice by Numbers and looking at your practice through the shared practices dashboard, and there are many other dashboards, you can go to practicebynumbers.com and set up a free trial.
Yeah, so definitely. So obviously I've listened to the podcast. So I obviously need a hygienist, because right now I'm only scheduled to, like, every Wednesday I'm doing restorative while the hygienist is there. And so right now I'm booked the next like 3 Wednesdays. But then after that, it's kind of nobody's on the schedule. So for restorative. And the honeymoon phase, this is definitely the honeymoon phase. I'm seeing treatment that's needed just by switching to a digital x-ray. You could definitely see a lot more. But, there's going to be that, it's coming in the near future, nearer than I thought. So I think I've seen roughly 115 of the 600 patients so far. So that's good too. But, obviously your ideas would be great.
All right. So yeah, you're playing the patient flow game for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so he was running 3 days a week of hygiene?
Yeah.
And how many days did you bring this hygienist on?
1 so far, just because she didn't want to come on more than 1 day. She found a temp job until like October or November or something. So she only wanted to do 1 day, but I also, it's the hygienist that was previously there, and she has a great mix with the front desk. They're really close and things like that. But it's kind of a, let's see how she is with the culture, because this is all brand new. All the equipment is brand new. I'm brand new. I didn't want to change the name or how it looks on the inside, but pretty much everything else I've updated. So we're just going to kind of test the waters and see. I've also been polling the patients to see if they are really, only want her, and it's about 50-50. So
what are you saying to them?
I'm just like, oh, so the hygienist is coming back, and then they'll be like, oh, I love this hygienist. I'll schedule for only her next time. So it's like, they kind of tell me whether or not, and then they'll say like, oh, I don't even know her name. So I'm like, okay, well then you obviously aren't, you're not, exactly exclusively with her. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think my biggest thing for you would be, I would want 3 days of hygiene in this practice. If I'm there 3 days a week, I want 3 days of a hygienist there. I'm looking at the number of appointments you have, and you have 99 appointments set up for August. You have like 60 in September, and then you have the drop that everyone else has in October, November. My
Yep.
guess is this state was one that was closed, pretty much all of April, but then opened up at the beginning of May,
Yep.
kind of mid-May. Is that about right?
Yep.
So I would definitely want 3 days a week of hygiene.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a bare minimum. Maybe you have her on one day, you go get somebody else 2 days, but I definitely would want to have 3 days of hygiene.
Okay. And the other thing too is Friday's a weird day in this area. For some reason, I thought Fridays everyone would want, but now that everyone is pretty much working from home, they can kind of come whenever. And so for some reason, Fridays are just not as booked up as the other days, which I find fascinating.
What days do you guys work?
So this is also weird. We do Monday, Wednesday, Friday 1 week. Then the following week, we do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so it switches. I don't
love
like it.
that.
You love it?
Really?
You love it?
Why don't you like that?
I get confused. I'm like, oh, what week is it? And then I like forget and I'm like, ooh, do I need to set my alarm? So
are you thinking of solo long term?
Yes.
Okay.
I was an associate and it wasn't a great experience. I had 2 associateships and one of them was fabulous. It was the best job I've ever had. And I literally went in there almost in tears saying, I bought a practice, I'm leaving. But then the other one, I mean, they wouldn't even let me numb their patients. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you mean they wouldn't let you numb their patients?
Yeah, they said they didn't like that I used a mirror to retract the cheek to numb. So I couldn't numb. It was bizarre.
So wait, you liked your associateship.
I liked
So
one
what does
out
that
of the
have to
2.
do with the solo
Yeah,
question?
I got, I kind of got, just turned off to the whole multi-doc practice during that.
During the retracting the mirror thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the associateship you loved, you were the only doctor there?
Pretty much. I mean, they would kind of be there once in a blue moon, but pretty much I just kind of came and went whenever I wanted to. And it was my schedule that day and they weren't around. So
yeah. And you like that better?
I loved it.
Yeah. So I think associateships are great, because obviously, right, you listen to the show, I have a multi-doc practice bias,
Yes.
but it's because I like that.
Yes.
Many don't. Right. So it's just know thyself. And the fact that you know that you don't like that. So yeah, solo's fine. The reason I was asking that is because solo I think 3 days a week for a solo is like perfect.
It's money.
It is. And so your practice is already 3 days a week. And so I actually had a client, Ike, I'm saying his name because we've had him on the show.
Yes.
And he has a practice 3 days a week. And he just relentlessly kept asking me about opening more days.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
And I kept telling him no. And then we got his practice to like over $1 million. And now he's happy that he only works 3. And so for you, the fact that you're only 3 is to your advantage. The fact that you're small is also to your advantage because now you can make your hours long term.
Right.
Whatever you want them to be. You can hire team members that will work those hours. You don't have to like have this 5-day-a-week practice that you're contracting down to 3.
Right. Yeah.
So where that comes in is some solos. This is a really popular solo schedule that people like. It's like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the following week a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Right.
And then that way you can advertise Monday through Friday hours, but you get a week off every other week.
Yeah. And that sounds perfect.
So that's where the fact that the staff is already used to a every other week changing schedule, the fact that you guys already see patients Monday through Friday on any one given day, it leads to a very smooth transition to what would be a very ideal schedule long term of a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, week 1, and then week 2 is a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah, that sounds better than, I don't know why I didn't think of that. So thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, what I would do, and this is where, so you're kind of on the side of like, I don't want to change a whole lot. I just bought this thing. I get where you're coming from. You didn't buy anything that you don't want to change. I'll put it that way. So, right,
Yeah.
like you didn't really buy like this practice that you're worried about the goodwill of, the one staff member that works there. You know what I mean? Like it's pretty nimble. So I would make a lot of changes sooner than later in your situation because you don't have a whole lot of infrastructure already in place.
Okay. Yeah, that
So I
sounds
mean,
like a good idea.
you could go in Monday morning and you could say, all right, like as soon as possible, 6 months from now, schedule is going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. And they have, well, the front desk has been asking me, what do you want to do in 6 months? And so, yeah, I'll work on that tomorrow. So,
There you go. So yeah, so it's good to know that. And then again, I think you need 2 days a week I think you need 3 days a week of hygiene on those days for sure. But I think the elephant in the room is, new patient flow.
yeah.
So, that's, everything starts and ends there with this. But I do want to say, right, this practice is doing 230K a year. And honestly, I think that's a generous estimate based on I've seen the historical numbers on PBN. And you got 542 active patients here.
Okay.
So realistically, with one hygienist seeing these patients 3 days a week, with no more additional new patient flow, you can still get this to like 40 to 50K a month. Just with one assistant, one hygienist, one front desk. That's fairly doable without an increase in new patient flow. So, that would be for me step one.
Okay.
Because new patient flow, it's not going to be like this. Like I know you just did an every door direct mail. I don't want to downplay the results of that.
Right.
But it's probably not going to get you to where you want to be.
No, definitely not. I know I'm just hoping for one patient out of that.
Yeah, I think you'll get one patient. I think that's solid.
Yeah, that's the goal.
If your over under is one, I think you'll be pleased. I like that expectation going in.
I have low expectations.
Good. Yeah, low expectations is always it's funny. There was this I was reading this book. I can't say the name on air or else we'll get an explicit rating on iTunes.
Oh.
And it was talking about the expectation gap. And it's the things that you're disappointed about are when you're expected, like the gap between reality and expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think walking into this practice, my expectation for how long it will take to get solid new patient flow, very long.
Yeah. I'm thinking like 3 years is like kind of my estimate. So
I would say 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
I would say 6 to 9 months. You need to be seeing realistically around 30 new patients a month to be like a sustainable solo practice. And so that's not super hard. I would get Swell. Have you had Swell yet?
Not yet, but I know you guys promote it. So I know. So I'm kind of hesitant to do it just right now, just because of the name, name change. So I don't know if that's a good idea to do it now or to wait until the name change.
So first of all, this the name change is you're worried about like building the wrong Google listing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just change the name. On the Google listing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's no biggie. The other, I know we promote Swell. Like, yes, we promote Swell because like we don't promote a lot of companies, but the companies we promote, we really believe in. And the thing is with Google reviews in general, right? That's the cheapest form of marketing.
Right.
And it's going to take the longest to get into effect.
Okay.
So I want that in like yesterday.
Okay.
That way, 6 to 9 months is just how long it takes to build up enough reviews so that you start being reputable in your area. Do you know how many reviews like the top practice in your area has?
Oh, that's a good question. Not off the top of my head.
Man, I'm going to pull up Matt right now. He Googles every practice underwater that he does. He Googles the practice and he looks at you have 28 reviews. That's solid.
Yeah. And actually one of them was pretty recent. And it was on me. And I was like, oh, that was so nice. So
I'm so happy you experienced that for the first time.
I did. And I never have looked at reviews in the last 2 years of practicing. I've never looked at one. I'm one of those people.
Yeah, I know. Luckily, right? But
Yeah.
It seems like your area 150 is sort of the number.
Okay.
So once you get 150, you're the top dog.
Okay.
There's like 4 practices kind of hanging out between 100 and 140.
Okay.
So you have a build, but that took me, Yeah, and I obviously see more patients than you, but I think with Swell, you could probably do that in 9 to 12 months. So that would be something that I would want to front load. And and again, the reason I'm saying that is you want to plant marketing seeds,
Right.
but you're not ready for a direct mail push
Okay.
until somebody can look you up
Okay.
and see, oh, hey, this is somebody I actually want to go to. Like, you're telling a lot of people about yourself, but then they're going to look you up and they're going to say, it's just the marketing, you haven't planted enough marketing seeds yet to really harvest.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So first step, I truly feel, is before you start spending money on marketing, is to have a solid online reputation, a good looking website, maybe your own name, all of those things in place. But right now, and the reason I said that earlier with your practice being able to do 500K a year is because, you just focus on internally for the next 6 to 9 months while your marketing is sort of hatching.
Okay.
And then when your marketing is ready, when your online reputation is there, when your practice is a little bit bigger, more cash flow, new patients are becoming your number one problem, then at that point, I would spend the money on marketing.
Okay.
But for me, the way I'm looking at your practice, I would see that your lack of a stable hygiene department
Yes.
is issue number one.
Yes.
But it's not like you're a total startup. You have enough patients to put in hygiene. They're just
Right.
not in hygiene.
Yeah. And I have already spoken to the hygienist that I am very particular about the perio department.
Okay.
That,
Are you a former hygienist?
I am not. I was actually an assistant.
Okay.
Yeah. There you go. Good job.
But you're very particular about perio.
I am, just because I feel like it's an area that is totally like I see the perio on my own while I'm there, and I was like, why? What are we doing? And I spoke with the hygienist about it, and I said, we really need to work on this because that is an area that you can grow. So I think that's another thing. And then everyone keeps asking for whitening. I have had so many patients. I don't know what it is. I think people just looked in the mirror during COVID that they're like, I want my teeth whitened. And I was like, I'm sitting there and I was like, I didn't think that would be something that I need to do right now, but the demand is there. So I'm bringing that in. I'm working with a rep on that. So
bringing that in.
Because they haven't done whitening in a long time.
Like a Zoom whitening or like a over-the-counter whitening type
just,
thing?
Yeah, the
like
tray.
the trays or whatever. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So trays are easy.
Yeah, that's what we're kind of starting this week. Hopefully I've gotten the package. I haven't gone to the practice this weekend to see, but it's okay. Get it next week. So
yeah, and I think for you, the plan is pretty simple. I think it's really, if building that solid infrastructure.
Yeah.
So you have one front office, one assistant, one hygienist. You guys are all working efficiently in terms of diagnosis, treatment planning, and all that stuff. It's sort of hard to look at your practice by numbers with your diagnosis, treatment planning, and all that, because it's just such a small practice. Your patient flow is not really. It's almost like sometimes I look at a startup on PBN, and it's not really. There's not a whole lot to look at. I'll put it that way. Yeah. So I think but for you, I would really focus on. I think from talking to you, I would spend more of time and effort on building good team members. I would try not to have 2 hygienists there. Actually, I think I take that one back. I would have 1 hygienist there.
Okay.
3 days a week. So if it's not this one, I would just make the switch early to one that you like, that's your culture.
Okay.
And build a solid team.
Yeah, I know. And it's kind of concerning to me, even, bringing a new hygienist into the mix with the front desk. I'm getting a little concerned just because they are super close, and I foresee this being an issue down in 6 months, so with her. So just because I don't know, she is asking for 3 days already. And, I kind of explained to her, well, right now I can give you 1. And I had to, actually be in the practice to see how things were going. And I asked her to start last week and she said no. And I was like, okay, we'll see you next week then. So Yeah.
Wait, so the hygienist asked for 3 days.
Yeah, and I had only given her one right now because I wanted to see how she worked into the mix, almost like a test to kind of
Yeah.
see, because she was, she was allowing only 1 day right now, but we'll see very soon how it works out.
Okay, and then did you offer her 3 days or no?
Not up front, because she has this other job, so she was like, I don't want to rock the boat with this job. I could give you 3 days, in November or December. So we'll see. I might be able to, if we work well together, she may want to just jump ship with me. That would be great. So, but we'll see.
Okay, and it's funny. I've been on the fence. I don't. It's hard because with your practice, I wasn't sure if this was a 1-parter or a 2-parter.
Okay.
And I think you just gave me enough stuff for a 2-parter. So I'm gonna wrap up part 1 right here.
All
and
right.
I think there's some staff conversations to be had in part 2, because this is a lot of. It's funny. This is so not my realm of coaching. It's funny that this is like a 2-employee, 3-employee practice where it's very dependent on you, and it's against everything that I tend to be about.
Yes.
And so you're putting me in a funny position, but I'm excited. I'm going to dive in with you, and I think I'll do an exercise next episode of if I were you and I owned this practice, what would it look like and what would I do?
Right.
And then we'll go from there.
Perfect.
Cool. All right. We'll wrap up this week and we'll talk next week.
All right. So I hope you guys, Matt and I were being a little harsh on the quality of the practice that we were looking at in terms of for the show in the intro. And, I hope you guys sort of maybe saw what we were talking about now. It's hard to talk about a practice that has like $15,000 a month in collections. It doesn't give us a lot we can't judge the retention. We can't talk about, patient flow. It just turns into a marketing conversation. And, it wasn't so, but again, I want to, Matt, I'm going to address how I found this guest, because she actually very, very avid listener and somebody who is very, she knows a lot about practice underwater, and she had a Facebook post that really impressed me with her practice management knowledge. And so I reached out to her. I'm like, oh, this person's an owner. She knows a lot. And so I think the thing that struck me was the quality of the practice she bought was very low. And she said that it was low because of the area that she wanted to live in. It was a very exclusive area and all that stuff. But it was, very clearly illustrating the kind of uphill battle you have when you buy the wrong practice. I think this could have been a very good pre-ownership episode as well.
Yeah. Did you guys get into it in the interview or part 2? I can't remember that. Why did she buy it other than location? Like, you can very easily live in the desirable location and practice somewhere else. Like, what about this did she like?
I just took her at her word for that. You're right. Because so I know after we recorded, we talked about this, and she kind of used the Scottsdale analogy, and it's a great analogy because, if I was a dentist and I lived in Phoenix like I do, and I were to say, I really want to live in Scottsdale, I wouldn't have practiced in Scottsdale, actually. But what she did was, she lives in the Scottsdale of her area and practices like 2 minutes from her house. So maybe she was unwilling to have the commute. Maybe she just really wanted to serve that population. But you're right. The play here, and I didn't even think of that until now, until you said it. The play here is definitely living in the Scottsdale of your area while commuting to the better area to practice. And right, like we kind of always allude to it on the show of like buying that practice that isn't cash flowing, doesn't have. She has the biggest uphill battle because of patient flow.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's going to take a long time. And that's where I told her, it's not even marketing is not even the biggest problem right now because she doesn't have the systems in place. She doesn't have the staff in place. She has 1 employee and no patients, and very few patients. It's a very tough situation to walk into for sure.
It's a startup without all the good things about a startup, without the brand new building, handpicking your staff, like doing the marketing campaign before you buy it, like for what we think of startups, they do have some benefits, and this doesn't have any of those. This is just kind of an older building in a nice part of town. 3 ops equipped.
It's really the worst of both. In an acquisition, it's really the worst of both. It's like the worst things that an acquisition has to offer with none of the benefits, and a lot of what a startup has to offer without money at the benefits. So it's almost like if you take the two models and blend them, it's like the worst of both.
The only thing worse I could think of is like a really an office you spend a lot of money on that isn't
Yes, like I said, that is the benefit, is that she didn't pay a lot for this. And she told me off how much she paid.
It's got one benefit.
Yeah, purchase price.
Yeah.
Totally. Wait, did she say how much you paid on air?
Yeah, 150, right?
Yeah, 150. Yeah, that's kind of my cutoff for any terrible practice. Don't pay any more than 150. And,
yeah, that was good advice. I never heard those numbers. That kind of like you said, would you call it the middle area where it's undesirable?
Yeah, there's no man's land. So the benefit that she's going to have is once she turns this thing around, then she has very little debt and her equity is large. That's the benefit. It's just the road to getting there is long. And that's where if she had paid $300,000 or $400,000 for this practice, it would have been like the worst possible situation because now she has regular debt with like all the other stuff. So yeah, I find that 150 is sort of that. But man, yeah, this is very much, and she said it on air. She's like, this is not the practice you would recommend buying. Like, no, clearly. But it also, yes, if she can pull this off, it's just a long road. It's a long road that a lot of effort.
So much effort. I couldn't even imagine. It just gives me like the hives thinking about it.
And then you don't make any money in the process. It's not like when you're buying a larger practice that you are growing further. You have effort, but you're also making money in the process. This is just like, accountant salary with, a ton of time and effort being a dentist. Like it's.
I like how the seller put it. He's paying himself Social Security from the practice. A year.
Wait, what was that? I don't remember that comment.
The seller is making like $60,000 a year from this, and he's like, "Yeah, it's basically my Social Security." I love these old retiring dentists. I love them. I find them very endearing.
I find it so odd how they can work as a dentist like full time ish, with like less than $100,000 in earnings. Like we see that all the time, and not be bothered by it. I mean,
I had a guy across the hall from me who retired, gave me his charts. It was like 200 charts. He was like 79.
You did a chart acquisition?
He just gave them to me. He he had one room. He had one assistant. His wife was the manager, but she passed. R.I.P. But yeah, little old guy, just 200 charts. What's he doing in there?
I got done roasting Albert. I mean, he looks like a superstar compared to these guys. I mean,
what are these guys doing? Someone take the handpiece out of their hand.
Yeah. So, Laura, she's got herself a road, and that's the piece that, but I think part 2 is cool because I put myself in her shoes and like, if I were you, what would I do? Right. And there is a world where I think, and I use the Mark Costas analogy. I'm pretty sure this is what he did in the first part of his career is he bought these types of practices and turned them around himself.
Medicaid type offices that he.
Yeah. And, I mean, this isn't a Medicaid practice by any means, but in terms of like low collections, value add, just pay very little for a practice, have no debt on it. This is very much, that was the model he subscribed to the first time. So anyway, let's listen to part 2. I think there's a lot more practice management stuff in there. And I did enjoy that exercise that I go through of what would I do if I was in this position.
Yeah, I like when you talk about yourself in the third person too.
It's a quality that George does well.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Practice Underwater. We'll see you guys next week.
If you're interested in one-on-one coaching with either Dr. George Hariri or Dr. Matt Garino, our contact emails are in the show notes.
And if you're interested in being on Practice Underwater as a guest, where we could look at your practice anonymously, you can go ahead and contact the email in the show notes and follow those directions to get on the show. Thanks, and we'll see you guys next week on Practice Underwater.